Hi, in this Synth Secrets, we're heading back to the 70s to revisit Parliament's 1977 classic, Flashlight. This track owes so much of its signature sound to the synthmanship and melodic Moog sensibilities of Bernie Worrell. Bernie lent his sounds a feeling of life, and his playing had a way of making it sound like the synth was talking, singing, or laughing. So much of the magic was, of course, in Bernie's fingers, but a lot of it lies in simply knowing something about his approach and the tools he used. We'll dive into Bernie's method by recreating and exploring a few of Flashlight's key synth parts using Ableton's Wavetable synth. If you like using Ableton and indeed Wavetable, we've covered how to make the sounds of Floating Points, Anna, Parliament, Sophie, Boards of Canada and Blawan, all using Ableton's Wavetable. We've left links below to them all. We've also dropped a link to the original tune of Parliament's Flashlight below, but for now, here's a taste of the parts we've created today. And here they are in the context of a tune. Before we get going, please remember to subscribe and hit the notification button. We appreciate the support. Right, let's get to it. Set your project tempo to 105, or even better, download the session at the link below to get some helpful extras like a drum loop to work with. Next, reference the MIDI sequence on screen to get the notes right. If you simply draw the MIDI onto the piano roll, make sure to apply a groove to the MIDI by visiting the groove section of Ableton's browser. Locate swing 16th 59 and drag that groove onto the MIDI loop you sequenced. Call up an instance of Wavetable. For starters, we'll get the oscillator section right. Starting from the left, just get it over with and let's just turn the sub-oscillator on and pull the tone setting up to about 25%. Set the octave setting to 0 rather than the -1 default. Then, move over to oscillator 1, choose the vintage category of wavetables, then select the mini waves wavetable to get an assortment of mini Moog sounds. Move the oscillator position to 40% or just click on the saw wave on the graphical interface. Now, jump all the way to the right of the synth and switch the voicing mode from the default poly setting to mono and set the glide to 45 milliseconds. Here's our progress so far. Though what we have sounds fat, it isn't quite right yet. Click on Oscillator 2 tab, activate the oscillator with the button up top, and again select the vintage category and the mini waves wavetable. This time, we're selecting the square wave at the top at oscillator position 100%. We're also going to change the pulse width by moving to the bottom of the oscillator section, changing the oscillator effect setting from none to modern, then setting the warp value to -25%. Just a bit to the right, set the semi value to -12 to transpose this oscillator down one octave. Then, move over to the amp envelope and pull the release down to about 15 to 20 milliseconds to get a tighter, punchier bass. Finally, to balance the tone out a bit, pull the volume down on oscillator 2 about 3 decibels, and move back over to oscillator 1 and pull it way down in the neighborhood of 17 decibels. This will drastically alter the sound and get us in the ballpark of where we want to be. Here's our progress so far. You can't talk about the sound of a Moog without talking about the sound of its filter. The Moog ladder filter is a critical part of its sound. So in the filter section of Wavetable, switch from the clean filter type to PRD, which Ableton describes as a ladder circuit without resonance limiting. That's the ticket right there. Set the resonance to about 20% and the frequency around 1500 Hz. You can go lower for a darker tone if you like. Then we'll use the amp envelope to modulate the filter cutoff. Open up the matrix tab in the modulation section. Click on the frequency knob in the filter section to force filter 1 frequency to become available as a modulation destination. Then set the amp column value to 15 on the filter 1 frequency row. And now we've got the sound. Here's our progress so far. Now we're going to turn our attention to the string sound. First things first, get the notes right. Create an instrument track and sequence a loop that looks like this. Then drop an instance of Wavetable on the track and let's get to it. Let's start in the oscillator section by selecting the JUP saw pulse wavetable from the vintage category and set the oscillator position to about 65%. This vintage tone evokes the vibe of the Roland Jupiter 8, and it's just what we need. Then set the amp envelope so that the attack reads about 25 milliseconds, decay about 1 second, sustain reads about -4 decibels, and release about 125 milliseconds. Here's our progress so far. This sound is obviously a bit too in your face to make a passable string patch. We need some complexity, some funky phrase relationships, some things that soften and widen the sound. For starters, activate oscillator 2. Select that same JUP saw pulse wave, set the semi to -12 semitones, which transposes this oscillator down 1 octave. Set the oscillator volume to about -4 decibel and the wavetable position to about 75. Play a few notes, then set the detune, det, to about 8 cents, which gives just enough detune to give oscillators 1 and tune a kind of chorusing effect when played together. Here's our progress so far. Now, move over to the filter section. The low pass filter is already turned on, but we want to switch the high pass filter on as well. Set the resonance on both filters to about 50%, set the frequency on the low pass filter to about 4.5 kHz, and set the high pass to about 1.5 kHz. This gives the whole thing a kind of nasal sound that fits the vintage vibe. Now, pull the volume on the whole synth down to about 20 decibels. This is a pad after all, we don't need it slapping the listener in the face. For final touches, drop an instance of Ableton's Chorus Ensemble audio effect. Select the ensemble setting, set width to 100%, bring the rate to 2.20 Hz, crank the warmth up to 100% and leave everything else the same. Then throw on a reverb audio effect, pull the dry wet mix down to about 40, and now you've got a pretty good stand-in for a vintage string machine. Here's our progress so far. Here's our final sound. And here's the final sound in the context of a track. If you like this tutorial, please drop a comment below with any suggestions of tracks you'd like us to try and recreate. Thanks for watching and see you next time.